So many people think America was better when Donald Trump was president. I want to talk about why. I think we need to have this conversation because on the surface, I understand their argument. I really do. To them, they look at it and they say, look, food was cheaper, gas was cheaper, rent was cheaper, immigration was under control, there were no wars in the world. Why wouldn't I vote for Trump? That is the argument that so many people who are voting for Trump are making. And I think we need to have an honest, unbiased discussion about how much of that can be attributed to Donald Trump and how much of it can't. We're going to cover cost of living, gas prices, immigration, and wars. And we're going to take an honest look at how much credit Trump really deserves for the circumstances that he had during his presidency. Okay, we're going to start with the economy and cost of living. And I think it's extremely important up front that we establish that Donald Trump was inheriting a thriving economy from Barack Obama. And by almost every single metric available, he did absolutely nothing to accelerate the growth that he inherited from Barack Obama. And there's really no place where you can point to where Trump's effect on the economy is clear. And I'm going to walk through every single measurable thing I possibly can to show you that. I'm going to be fair to Trump and start in the one place where he did best compared to Obama. Obama's wage growth was kind of flat throughout his presidency. It started to kind of get better at the end, and that continued through Trump's presidency and had a minor amount of acceleration. Looking at unemployment under Obama in the shaded area, it was dropping, and that drop continued on the exact same trajectory all throughout Trump's presidency. The same goes for black unemployment rate. I bring that up strictly because Trump says it all the time that he was great for black unemployment. He just inherited what Obama was already doing. The stock market was seeing very stable growth under Obama, and Trump just continued that same growth trajectory. Home prices were rising under Obama and continued that same rise under Trump. Consumer confidence, same trajectory under Obama to Trump until the pandemic made it plummet, which is not Trump's fault. GDP growth, stable under Obama, stable under Trump. Trade deficit, stable, stable. Subtly higher inflation under Trump than Obama, but 1.4, 1.9, it's all good. Inflation in food prices was under 3% for the whole 12 years of these two guys' terms. The best year was Obama's last year, but in the end, they both had pretty stable food price inflation. And when it comes to rent price inflation, Trump actually did see some acceleration above 3.5%, but in the end, it's not that big a difference between Obama and Trump. They both saw some rental inflation. Also, I want to jump out of this comparison between Trump and Obama for a second and just talk about inflation, because this is a chart of global inflation for all major G7 countries. And this is what happened to everybody. Every single country went through inflation like we did, and we all recovered from it like we recover from it now. To blame Joe Biden for inflation and give Trump credit for not having it is just silly. It's not how it works. So after looking at all this economic data and cost of living data, it's abundantly clear that Trump's policies and him being president didn't change the course of the American economy whatsoever. To be fair to Trump, he didn't tank the economy either, but let's put it this way. Obama built the house, Trump just lived in it. Let's go into our next section, which is gas prices. And gas prices are so multifactorial. It's not just something where the president comes in and goes, it's $3 now. Like, it doesn't work that way. There's 1,000 different things affecting the market, and very, very few of them the president has an impact on. Similar to what we did in the last section, here is Obama's era and here is Trump's. This is the end of Obama's era here, and here's where Trump went. You could see it's extraordinarily stable. This low, that's the pandemic. You know why gas prices were low in the pandemic? Because the demand for gas was extraordinarily low. One of the most common things you'll hear from Trump supporters is that Trump ramped up U.S. oil production. And that is true. Trump did ramp up U.S. oil production. You see it right there. But the argument that that is what affected gas prices is obviously incorrect, given that Biden has an all-time high. You see that very right end there. That's 2024. Biden is producing more oil than Trump ever did, and gas prices are higher under Biden. It's because gas prices are multifactorial. It's not just about how much domestic oil we produce. Also, right at the end of Obama's presidency is right before that big blip in production. That's where Trump was. If you remember, gas prices were extraordinarily stable between the last 2 years of Obama's presidency and Trump's 4 years. Pretty much exactly the same, despite the major increase in oil production domestically. I will give Trump credit on this is how he dealt with OPEC, because OPEC is essentially the organization that decides how much gas is going to cost. That's really what it comes down to. They're the ones who determine the market. They're the ones who determine production. They're the ones who determine how all this is really going to go. And Trump did put a lot of pressure on them all the time to try to keep prices where he wanted them. Now, there's no clear evidence that his pressure is what made OPEC change their mind about certain things, but the fact that he was attempting to do that was the right move, so I'll give Trump credit there. In the end, between domestic oil production and pressure on OPEC, he maybe had a small effect on the cost of gas, when in reality, gas costs are based on supply and demand, and that's why you saw the lowest gas prices you've seen in a long time under Trump during the pandemic, because nobody was going anywhere, and gas was just not something people had a big demand for. Next is immigration, and Trump unquestionably was better with illegal crossings than Biden was. Biden has done a poor job at the border, and yes, crossings are much further down now compared to what we're seeing here, but Trump did do a pretty good job. Immigration and your perspective on it really is something where it's about what you personally believe about how we want to treat people who aren't from this country. Trump treated them terribly and gave them no incentive to come here. He had travel bans on people from Muslim countries. It was not a great situation if you believe that America should be welcoming people in. But if you don't, Trump is definitely your guy with immigration. There's no question that he is a close the border, get him the fuck out of here kind of guy. The last thing we're going to talk about is the fact that people will say there were no wars when Trump was president, which is true. But the part I object to is the logic behind the fact that Putin never would have invaded Ukraine if Trump were president, because you hear that all the time. The truth is, Trump is a nationalist, which means he has no interest in getting involved in conflicts abroad. So Putin actually would have been better positioned with Trump as president, because Trump likely would have just said, fuck it, do what you want, I don't care, I'm not going to intervene. And when it comes to Hamas and Gaza and Israel, you have to remember this situation stemmed from a heinous terrorist attack that was committed by Hamas on Israel. Israel's responded with an expected but horrible, disproportionate response, and this is the set of circumstances. It's nothing that Trump or Biden or anybody would have affected. Israel was going to respond this way no matter who was president. That is just the way Israel functions. So when it comes down to this there were no wars thing, it's just circumstance. So in the end, context is the most important thing. Circumstance is the most important thing. Think of it this way. Donald Trump inherited a very stable ship on calm waters. He had a great growing economy and a stable world, and he's just going along until he crashes into the pandemic. And when he crashes into the pandemic, he completely unravels. His leadership was horrendous, and everybody was dying for change, and that's why he got decimated by a 77-year-old man in the 2020 election, because nobody trusted him. And now you're saying, okay, we have a really tough set of circumstances again, let's give the ship back to Trump. Why? Trump has not proven in any way, shape, or form that he can handle crisis. He's only handling calm. Joe Biden did a good job stabilizing everything else in an otherwise unstable world. He's handled some of the worst circumstances you could possibly imagine, between a war in Russia and Ukraine that destroyed our oil production in the whole world, and then a migrant caravan 10 times the size anything Trump ever saw arriving at our front door, and the worst economic and health circumstances in 100 years. It was a nightmare. The fact that you feel terrible today compared to 5 years ago, we all do. But voting for Trump to restore 5 years ago is not going to happen, because the circumstances are never going to go back to the way they were.